guys, welcome back. In today's video, I'll be showing you how I prepared for New Year's Eve dinner. I invited my brother and sister-in-law over, and this was the day before New Year's Eve. I was trying to prepare as much as I could ahead of time. This way I wasn't running around last minute trying to get everything together on New Year's Eve. I started off by making this pretzel jello. I will try to link all of the recipes down below, but I just melted this butter. I already had the jello sitting in a bowl cooling off, and if you follow the recipe it'll kind of make more sense. I crushed up the pretzels and mixing them with the butter mixture. This calls for just one baking dish, but I kind of split the recipe in half and did two smaller dishes because one would be too much for us, and so I did two separate ones and gave one away to our friends. So I put those in the oven to bake for 10 minutes, and while those were baking, I moved on to the next recipe, and I wanted to make these mini cheesecakes. I've made them before. They're really easy to make, and they're smaller portions, and I feel like they're easier to eat. The way I crush up my graham crackers is I put them in this mini food processor, whatever you want to call it, and just kind of pulse it a couple times until the crackers are turned into crumbs. And I just keep doing it because a lot doesn't fit in there one time. If you have a big one, that's great. It'll be a lot easier. As I was finishing that up, my timer went off on the stove, so I took these pretzels out of the oven and set them aside to cool off. They're supposed to cool to about room temperature. Then I moved back to this crumb mixture, so I added melted butter in there, mixed it up really good, and then I went ahead and put them in these little cupcake tins. In this video, you'll see kind of a little bit of back and forth because I'm trying to multitask, and while one thing's in the oven, I'll work on another, and this way I could get as much done in as little time as possible because this was in the evening. I was getting tired, but I knew the more I got done this day, the easier the next day would be for me. So I just scoop in a spoonful in each little tin and pat it down with a spoon so it's hard. This way when you pour the mixture on top, it doesn't leak through the crackers. Then I started working on the mixture that goes on top of the graham cracker crumbs. Poured that into the individual cups and then put that in the oven, set a timer, and my camera actually shut off, but I have a clip of me taking them out and they smelled so good. They do crack a little bit, which is normal. You'll read in the recipe as well, as long as they don't crack too much. But I just took them out and set them aside so they would cool down. While those were cooling, I moved back to the Pretzel Jello recipe. So here I am just throwing everything in for that middle white Cool Whip or whipped cream layer, and then putting that on top of the cooled pretzel mixture. After I was done with that layer, I put that in the refrigerator and started cutting the strawberries that will go on the top layer with that red jello. Then I washed some more strawberries and just put them in this cup with some sugar, put the lid on, put it in the refrigerator. This way the next day I can take them out and put them on my NutriBullet and just pulse them a little bit to create kind of like a sauce for the top of those mini cheesecakes. Then I moved on to making that whipped cream that will also go on top of those mini cheesecakes. But I noticed the next day when I did take it out of the refrigerator, it wasn't hard, or it was just kind of like melted away, which I was surprised because I've done this before where I've made it ahead of time and it was fine. So I'm not sure if I didn't mix it enough or maybe my refrigerator wasn't cold enough, but it didn't work. This part didn't really work out for me, but again, in my mind, it made it easier for me for the next day. Then this layer was done cooling, so I poured that red Jello on top and added the strawberries and put it back into the refrigerator. I was also planning on making garlic bread with dinner, so again, prepping as much as I could. I had this butter out so it can soften, but it didn't get quite as soft as I needed it to. And I love this garlic bread mixture. I don't measure, I just kind of sprinkle it in there and tried mixing it together. It was a little hard, but I did the best that I could. And then closed that and left that, so again, tomorrow would be easier to just spread it on the bread. I also went ahead and took the bread, cut it up, put it in a Ziploc bag, and that was one less step for me to do. All of these little steps that I'm doing ahead of time, like cutting the bread or making the mixtures, they really did help out because we had a church service on New Year's Eve and we came home and I know everyone was hungry, I was hungry, so it just made it so much quicker to just take the bread out, put the garlic mixture on top, pop it in the oven, and again, little things here and there, but they saved me so much time. I also tried to clean as I went, just clean up my surfaces, clean up my space. If I had time, I'd wash dishes. At one point, Eddie came and helped me wash dishes while I was doing other things, so that really helped. At the end of the night, I didn't have a huge mess. At this point, these mini cheesecakes had cooled off and I was putting them in the refrigerator. You can take the cupcake liners off, but I kept them on, this way they wouldn't stick together in this bowl. But when I was ready to serve them, I did take the liners off. This way they look a little bit cuter. I was planning on making stuffed peppers for dinner, so I washed those, took the inside out. I could have put the mixture inside, but I ended up just doing it right before I put them in the Instant Pot. So I dried those off after I cleaned them, put them in a bag, and this way they were ready to go the next day. After I clean off the countertops, I went ahead and set up the Instant Pot as well. One less step I'd have to do the next day. I also cleaned off the table and put out the plates. I didn't decorate it all fancy. The table is not too big, so I knew if I put any decorations on there, there wouldn't really be room for all the food. So I just wiped it down, put on the plates, napkins, cups, and silverware, and that was perfect. And yes, I do have OCD. I like when the plates are perfect, the napkins. Sometimes if I ask Eddie to set up the table and then I'll come look at it, and if something's crooked, it like drives me nuts. It's crazy, but it's like these little things that bother me. So this was very therapeutic to go through and make sure everything was straight. This was the last thing I did for that evening. I don't remember what time it was, but I was really tired, but it felt good going to sleep knowing that all of that was done. Moving on to the next morning, I was planning on making Shuba. It's kind of like a Russian dish. It was my first time making it alone. I've made it when I used to live back at home with my parents, so I was a little nervous, but you know what? You won't know until you try. So in the Instant Pot, I had some beets and potatoes steaming or cooking, and then I went ahead and started chopping up an onion. Then the timer went off on my Instant Pot, so I went ahead and took the potatoes out. The beets were still a little bit hard, so I left those in and then added in the carrots and turned it on for a few more minutes. I then later realized that I should have left the potatoes for a little bit longer, but I didn't want them to get too mushy because I still had to grate them. But that's okay, just something I learned for next time. But I have been loving this Instant Pot. I got it for Christmas from one of our friends, and it's so quick and easy. So I'm so glad I got it like the perfect time. I went back to finishing chopping up my onions and then moved on to cutting up the fish. I did put it on some paper towel to kind of get rid of that oil so it wasn't too greasy, and then once I cut it up, I just mixed it together with the onions. By this time, the beets were ready to get taken out. The carrots could have still used a little bit more time, but my eggs were actually done, so I figured I'd take the eggs out and put the carrots in that water and let them boil for a couple more minutes. I took a little break to eat some lunch, and then by this time the carrots had cooled off, so I started peeling those. And I just take a little knife and just kind of scrape the skin off. Later you'll see me using a paper towel. So I'm not sure if you follow, but Lena's Kitchen blog on Instagram, she posted that if you take a paper towel and just kind of rub it off, it comes off as well. So I remembered that and tried it out. It worked, but I was just so used to using the knife, so I went back to that method. I would normally use gloves to peel or grate the beets, but I didn't have any in the house. I was too lazy to go out in the shed and get some, so I just kind of used a paper towel. My hands were still covered and really red, but it was fine. They washed off. After everything was peeled and cleaned, I moved on to grating the carrots, potatoes, and the beets. So on this recipe, she puts everything on a plate and has this cake form or whatever it's called around it, and this way you stack it up, and then once you remove that form, it's kind of like a nice layered texture. But my mom always just stacks it on the plate. She doesn't use like a form around it, and it still turns out pretty. But I wanted to try this out. Next time I would have used something a little bit smaller so that the layers turn out a little bit thicker and taller, but it still was good. As long as it was good, I didn't mind. And so I just started layering everything how it was written in the recipe. And if you'll notice in the recipe that I have linked below, she doesn't call for eggs, but I know my mom and other people use eggs, and this is kind of, everyone has their own way of doing it. There is no right or wrong way. I feel like every family has their own way of doing it or layering it. Some people put the egg on top, but I put the egg on top of the carrots actually. So between certain layers you put some mayo, and you'll notice here in a second I grated the eggs and I wanted to put mayo on top, and then I quickly realized that wasn't a good idea because it just, all the eggs kind of stuck together and they wouldn't really like spread out good, like the mayo wasn't spreading. So I stopped, put the beets on top, and then put another layer of mayo. Like I said before, I will link all of the recipes down below. I will also link the recipe for the stuffed bell peppers. I actually have a video of me making those, so I'll link that. But everything came out really good, and if you've never tried some of these, I encourage you to try them. Let me know if you do, or maybe you have already been making these recipes. Let me know down below. After I was done layering everything, I just covered it with clear wrap and put it in the refrigerator. You keep the form on and take it off right before serving, and I will insert a clip later on of me taking off the form, and you'll see it's very short, but it still turned out good. Everyone liked it, so I'm glad I wasn't too scared to try it out for my first time. And then here's a clip of me just pulsing the strawberries the next day and putting those on top of the mini cheesecakes. I didn't put it on top of all of them because it was about like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and no one was really ready for dessert. I think I was the only one who had some. But I just put the strawberry mixture. You can cut up strawberries and put like whole strawberries on top and add whipped cream. But again, no one was really eating them at this point, so I just put the strawberry mixture on top. I hope this video encourages you to try maybe some new recipes, or kind of shows you how I like to prep ahead of time for parties. This was kind of like a last minute idea, but still everything turned out great. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you are new, and I will see you all in my next video.